Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 28 years old, and I run a small but successful neighborhood bar in Columbus, Ohio. Getting to this point was not some overnight success story. I started working as a waitress when I was 18, grinding out long shifts while most of my friends were still figuring out college parties and road trips. I skipped vacations, wore the same pair of sneakers until the soles had holes, and drove my ancient Honda Civic that rattled every time I hit the brakes. I saved every dollar I could, sometimes hiding crumpled 20s in an old coffee tin because I was terrified I would accidentally spend it. At 25, after years of double shifts and with a little help from my mom in the form of a modest loan, I bought out a failing dive bar. It was a place that smelled like old beer and bad decisions, but I saw potential. I painted the walls, polished the wood, bought secondhand furniture, and turned it into something warm and inviting. I put in sweat equity, actual blood from splinters and cuts, and enough stubbornness to outlast anyone who told me I was crazy. Slowly but surely, it became more than just a bar. It became a community hub. Locals would come for craft beer, trivia nights, or to play songs on the old jukebox that had a mind of its own. One night, a man who thought he was Frank Sinatra decided to belt out Sweet Caroline. He was so spectacularly off-key that the entire bar joined in, clapping out of rhythm, singing worse than him on purpose, and laughing until their stomachs hurt. That was when I realized this was not just a business. This was a place where people came to feel at home, to laugh, and to leave the weight of their problems at the door. Family life, however, was a different story. My parents divorced when I was 12. My mom eventually remarried a man named Frank, who is 55 now. From the start, Frank gave off this smug vibe, as if he was smarter than everyone around him. I wanted to like him because he seemed to make my mom happy for a while, but it was always complicated. He treated me like a kid long after I was paying my own bills and renting my own apartment. My younger brother, Kyle, who is 23 now, loved Frank because Frank spoiled him with gadgets and tickets to basketball games. Meanwhile, I got lectures about being responsible. It was very clear where his affection went, and it was not toward me. Despite the favoritism, I tried to do right by my family. I helped my mom with groceries when she was short on cash. I sent her money when the furnace broke down in the middle of winter. I showed up when they needed me because I believed that was what you did for family. Frank never saw it that way. He always acted like my help was expected, like I owed them something just for existing. The real trouble started when Frank began treating my bar like it was his personal clubhouse. At first, it was harmless. He and my mom would come for trivia night or a quiet dinner, and I would give them a family discount. I figured it was no big deal. But then he started bringing in his colleagues from work. Picture a group of middle-aged men in company polo shirts, strutting around like they own the place, shouting over the television during games, snapping their fingers at waitstaff, and ordering expensive bourbon as if it came from a tap in their backyard. They acted like frat boys who had never grown up, except now they had corporate salaries and egos to match. One night, one of them knocked over a bar stool so hard that the leather ripped open, leaving a jagged split down the seat. When I approached Frank with the bill for the damages, he just waved his hand and said, "Put it on the house, kiddo." I reminded him that this was not how things worked, that I could not run a business by giving away free drinks and covering damages for grown men who should know better. He smirked and said, "Family sticks together." That line cut deep, because with Frank, family always meant me giving and him taking. The breaking point came 2 months ago during March Madness, which any bar owner knows is one of the busiest times of the year. The bar was packed with customers, the televisions were glowing with games, the bartenders were moving nonstop, and the sound of cheering was almost deafening. In the middle of all this, Frank waltzed in with 7 of his colleagues. They pushed tables together like they owned the place and immediately began ordering steaks, pitchers of craft beer, rounds of shots, and even desserts. They racked up a $600 tab without blinking. When my bartender presented them with the bill, Frank stood up dramatically and declared for everyone to hear, "Do not worry, Sarah will take care of us." The table roared with laughter, clapping him on the back as if he had just told the funniest joke in the world. One man leaned over and said something so gross that I still feel angry when I think about it. He said maybe I should be their sugar daughter. That was the moment my blood boiled. I walked over and told them clearly everyone pays. That is how it works. Frank sneered at me in front of the whole crowd and said, "Are you really going to call the cops on your stepdad for a couple of drinks?" The way he said it, with that smirk and that condescending tone, made it clear he thought he had me cornered. He thought I would back down because he was family. But he underestimated me. I turned around, walked calmly into the back, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. I called the police and explained that I had a group refusing to pay their bill and that one of them was trying to intimidate me into giving away hundreds of dollars worth of food and drinks. The dispatcher said officers would be there shortly. 15 minutes later, 2 officers walked through the door in full uniform. The laughter at Frank's table died instantly. His colleagues froze, their faces draining of color as the officers approached and asked for identification. The atmosphere shifted from rowdy to deadly serious in seconds. When the officers explained that refusing to pay a $600 bill counted as theft, one of the men muttered, "Man, I am not losing my job for this." Suddenly, wallets came out, credit cards were slapped on the table, and cash was shoved into the bartender's hands. Frank's face turned red as a tomato. He looked furious, embarrassed, and cornered all at once. When he realized his colleagues were not about to risk criminal charges for him, he snapped, "Fine, we will settle it." They paid the full bill plus a decent tip, but the officers still took statements and gave Frank a very clear warning that if this happened again, he would be charged with fraud. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought the embarrassment would be enough to keep him from ever trying something like that again. I thought he would finally understand that my bar is not his playground and that I am not his doormat. I was wrong. Word spread fast. In the days after that Saturday night, my bar became known as the place where the boss got humbled. People who had never set foot in my place before came in because they had heard whispers of the story through friends, coworkers, or social media. Regulars retold it with dramatic flair, describing how the cops walked in, how the laughter died on Frank's colleagues' faces, and how the whole crew scrambled for their wallets. It became almost like folklore, the kind of thing people exaggerated with every retelling, and I let them, because for once it worked in my favor. One of Frank's colleagues in particular stood out. He started coming back quietly on his own. He did not bring the others, did not make a scene, and always sat at the bar with a book or a notebook while he ordered a beer and a burger. He tipped well, consistently more than 20%, and after a couple of visits, he admitted to my bartender that he respected me for standing my ground. Apparently, he had been mortified that night but realized later that I had handled it like a professional. In an odd twist, the humiliation made him loyal to my business. Frank, on the other hand, went silent. He stopped coming to the bar entirely. He stopped calling or texting. He did not even answer when I reached out to check in on my mom. It was like he decided I no longer existed. For a brief moment, I thought that might be a relief. But it did not stay quiet for long. My mom called one night crying. She said I had humiliated Frank in front of his friends and that he felt betrayed. She said he could not even show his face at work without people joking about the cops showing up to save the day. I reminded her that he humiliated me by standing in my business and trying to force me to work for free, in front of a packed bar no less. I told her that being family did not give him the right to run me into the ground. She sobbed, begged me to apologize, and said that I had no idea how hard Frank's life had been lately. I listened, but my chest tightened with every word. I had given so much to keep peace in that family, but not at the expense of everything I had built. The tension eventually boiled over when Frank took to Facebook. He posted a bitter status in big, dramatic paragraphs about how some people do not understand the meaning of family loyalty. He wrote that blood is supposed to be thicker than water, that loyalty is not supposed to come with a price tag, and that some family members only care about money. He did not name me, but it was obvious who he was talking about. Seeing my name dragged like that, even indirectly, stung more than I wanted to admit. The part that hurt most was when I saw that my brother Kyle had liked the post. It was a small gesture, just a blue thumbs up, but it felt like a betrayal. Kyle had always leaned on me when he needed advice, money, or support. He had been the one calling me at 2 in the morning from his college dorm when he was broke or scared, and I had always answered. To see him publicly side with Frank made me realize how deep Frank's influence had sunk in my family. I tried to shrug it off, to focus on my business, but the internet has a way of amplifying things you wish would stay quiet. Regulars at my bar saw the post, screenshotted it, and brought it in like it was the day's entertainment. One group of my trivia night regulars actually printed the post out in color and taped it above the jukebox. They stuck a neon sticky note to it that read, "No free tabs, Frank." When I walked into the bar and saw it for the first time, I froze. My first instinct was to tear it down, but before I could, a group of customers laughed and said it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. They said it was part of the bar's charm now, a story to point to whenever someone asked about the atmosphere. New customers were drawn to it like a magnet, reading it aloud and chuckling before ordering a drink. What had been intended as a bitter attack on me turned into a running joke that gave the bar even more character. Instead of hurting my reputation, it actually did the opposite. People respected that I had boundaries, that I was not afraid to call out entitlement even when it came from family. They told me it made them feel like they were supporting a place with integrity. Word spread even further. Strangers from across town came to see the jukebox post, to hear the story firsthand, and to enjoy the atmosphere that now had an extra edge of rebellious humor. The running joke made the bar even more popular, and my revenue actually went up. The situation at home only got worse after the Facebook post drama. My mom called me one night, her voice low like she did not want Frank to hear her from the next room. She confessed that Frank had been embarrassed at work because his colleagues no longer respected him. Apparently, word of what happened at the bar spread to his office too, and now they joked openly about how his stepdaughter runs a tighter ship than he does. Some of the same guys who were at the bar that night had slipped little comments into meetings, saying things like that I knew how to keep order better than their boss. My mom said he had been fuming about it for weeks, sulking around the house, taking it out on everyone else. Instead of reflecting or apologizing, he doubled down. A week later, he decided to come to my bar on a quiet weekday afternoon when I was not there. My bartender, Joe, was covering the shift. Joe is a retired firefighter in his 60s who treats the bar like it is his second firehouse. He does not take disrespect from anyone, but he also has this calm, commanding way of shutting people down without raising his voice. Frank walked in, ordered a meal and a drink, and when the bill came, he apparently tried to argue for a family discount. According to Joe, Frank leaned across the bar and demanded that since he was practically the owner's family, he should not have to pay full price. Joe looked him in the eye and told him, "Your money's no better than anyone else's, pay or leave." There was no wiggle room in his tone, no room for negotiation. Frank's face turned red, and instead of paying, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard that the little brass bell we keep above it broke off the hook and clattered onto the floor. Joe later told me that the entire bar went silent, then laughed as soon as Frank was gone. He swept up the broken bell and tossed it in the trash, saying we would just get a sturdier one. When I heard about it, my chest tightened with a mix of anger and exhaustion. It was clear Frank was not going to stop pushing until he got what he wanted. That night, I sat down and thought about all the little ways I had been enabling the situation. One thing stood out immediately. I had been sending my mom $200 a month for groceries ever since her hours at her job were cut last year. I did not mind helping her, because she is my mom, but I realized that money was indirectly funding Frank's inflated sense of entitlement. He never seemed to notice or thank me, but he was perfectly comfortable letting me ease his household bills while he strutted around like he owned everything. I decided to cut ties financially. I called my mom and explained gently that I could not keep subsidizing Frank's ego. I told her that I loved her and I wished I could support her more, but I was done letting him benefit from my hard work. She was upset, her voice breaking as she said she needed the help, but I stood firm. I reminded her that I had worked too hard to let Frank siphon off my earnings while treating me like a child. It was one of the hardest conversations I had ever had with her, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was drawing a real boundary. The strange twist came later that night when my phone buzzed with a text from my younger brother, Kyle. It was short and hesitant, but it hit me harder than I expected. He wrote, "Maybe you were right. He acts like he owns everything." Here's the part one did not expect. Frank lost his job. I thought the humiliation from the police showing up at my bar was the peak of the story, but it turned out that it was just the beginning of his unraveling. One of his colleagues, the same type who used to laugh along with him, apparently went to HR and reported the March Madness incident. At first, I thought it was just office gossip spilling over, but HR actually took it seriously. They pulled the police report from that night, and once they had that in hand, they started digging deeper. That is when they uncovered that Frank had been using his company credit card for what he called client entertainment at bars and restaurants around town, except the receipts told a different story. He had been writing them up as official business dinners, but in reality, they were just outings with his buddies. Combined with the police report, it painted an ugly picture. He was not only reckless, but dishonest. The company decided to cut ties quietly, no dramatic firing or security escort out of the building. They simply told him his position was no longer needed and that he should clear out his office. In corporate speak, that was the end of the line. My mom called me that night devastated. Her voice cracked as she said the words out loud, like she could not believe them herself. Frank had been let go. She said she was scared about money, about what came next, about everything unraveling so quickly. But then she said something that stunned me into silence. She said, "Sarah, I think I've been blind. He was never proud of you. He was jealous." That hit me harder than I could have imagined. For years I thought Frank looked down on me because he genuinely believed I was irresponsible or childish. Hearing my mom admit that his constant lectures, his smirks, his dismissive attitude were not rooted in superiority, but in resentment, felt like someone had just ripped the curtain away. He was jealous. Jealous that I had built something from the ground up while he coasted on a corporate paycheck, pretending to be important. Jealous that people respected me in my own space, while he had to bully people to feel respected in his. It reframed every interaction I had ever had with him. The fallout at home was messy and loud. Frank and my mom had a screaming fight that shook the walls. Neighbors later told me they heard it from their porches. He shouted about loyalty, about betrayal, about how she never took his side. She shouted back about how tired she was of being embarrassed, how tired she was of defending him when he never once defended her or me. A few days later, he moved out. He packed his things into his car and drove off without even telling me. My mom filed for divorce a few weeks later. In the middle of all that chaos, something unexpected happened. My mom started spending more time with me. She stayed at my apartment part-time, and because she did not want to sit around stewing in her own thoughts, she started helping out in the bar kitchen. At first, it was small things, chopping vegetables, washing dishes, organizing shelves. But soon she was helping with prep, plating appetizers, and even coming up with a couple of specials. To my surprise, she was good at it. Customers noticed. They liked the new dishes, and they liked seeing the family dynamic that was finally healthy instead of toxic. Kyle came around too. At first, he seemed hesitant, like he was testing the waters, but slowly he started spending more evenings at the bar. He sat at the counter, joking with the regulars, helping carry kegs into the back when deliveries came in. There were moments when we would stand together, staring at the ridiculous sign above the jukebox, the printed screenshot of Frank's bitter Facebook post with a neon sticky note saying, "No free tabs, Frank." What used to feel like a wound turned into something we could laugh about. Kyle even admitted that he felt lighter being there, like he did not have to pick sides anymore because the truth had already spoken for itself. The bar thrived. Business surged in ways I had not predicted. Customers loved the story. But more than that, they loved the atmosphere that came from resilience. They felt like they were supporting not just a bar, but a victory over entitlement. Last week, a food blogger came in unannounced. She ate, she drank, she chatted with customers, and then she wrote a glowing review online. She called it the most drama-free bar with the most dramatic backstory. The phrase stuck. People repeated it like a slogan, and suddenly we were getting new faces every night who wanted to see what the fuss was about. For the first time in a long time, I felt like things were balanced. I had kept my boundaries. My family had finally seen the truth for themselves. And Frank? He had learned the hard way that you do not mess with the bartender who also owns the place. And yes, the jukebox still plays Sweet Caroline at random, as if it knows exactly when to break the tension and remind us all that even the most dramatic stories can end with everyone laughing off key.